Today we are joined by Jett Rush, graduate of East Texas A&M, and we're so happy to have you. He is also a first-year veterinary student at the University of Missouri College of Veterinary Medicine. And today we are talking about our journey to veterinary medicine and also how to deal with rejection, gap years, and acceptances. Thanks so much, Jett, for joining us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Yes, and we also sent out a Google form to, I sent it to some LSU students. It was posted in the APPMA chat on Facebook. So we have some responses about other people's experiences, some generic questions like majors and what they did during their gap years, but also some, handwritten responses. So thank you to everybody who responded to that. There's some really valuable information in here, and I wish we had enough time to go through all of it, but I kind of gave a synopsis here at the end, and we might bring it up throughout the chat today. So if it comes up, that's what I'm referring to, or we might do a little run through it at the end. Yeah, so Jet, do you want to tell us a little bit about your full journey from undergrad or high school through now?
Yeah, so definitely. So I am originally from Grand Prairie, Texas. I went to South Grand Prairie High School where I was the leader of our vet tech program, which led me to go do many cool things. I even got to go to Washington, D.C. to talk about to keep technical programs in high school. I got to meet my Texas Governor Ted Cruz there. Then from there, I went off to the East Texas A&M University, where I was in a fraternity, I was in some honor societies. I was a biology major, and then I also, about my junior year, they added a tech program, so I joined some of that there. And then I've worked full time as a technician all through undergrad, paid through all my undergrad while working. And yeah, it took me about four attempts to get into vet school. I don't really count the first one because it was like kind of my junior year one, but it still counts as a application. And it was about 2 years after I graduated from college is when I got in. And vet school's been amazing since. I've had a wonderful time, a lot of studying, a lot of tears shed, but a lot of smiles too.
I always say Jet and I are like the only ones in the anatomy lab constantly,
Mm-hmm.
and the bags
Mm-hmm.
under our eyes completely grow constantly.
Yep. Yep. It's it. I'll always catch Gretel there in the morning.
Yes. Well, I do overnights for full team, and Jet does
Mm,
overnights in the hospital, so we probably
yep.
have some of the least amount of sleep in the school.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Especially like every time I close.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that y'all are doing, I don't know about you, Jet, but I believe the full team is unpaid. Like, that's just for fun, right?
Oh no. I no, no, no. I work for money. I
Or
work receptionist at the emergency hospital.
exactly. One thing I was just going to bring up is that a lot of people, I don't want to say a lot, but a couple people that had responded did say, "Oh, I wish I saved more money." There's
Mm,
never, it's always
it's
great to have more money. It wasn't that anybody
mm-hmm,
said it was a huge deal, but it was like some more money would have been nice. And I've
mm-hmm,
definitely been facing that just with like my personal finances. And
mm-hmm,
I mean, I have a job as a student rep for Hills, so I
mm-hmm.
get paid through that. And then I'm also going to be working as an emergency receptionist. So it's like,
Nice. Best place to study. It
I'm
makes you
hoping.
stare at a computer for hours, so you have to, if I'm not checking a client, handling a call or anything, I just have Quizlet up or a
Oh
PowerPoint
yeah.
going.
I'm hoping it'll give me a little bit of time throughout, but it's also emergency, so if not, I get it.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're gonna have those nights where you're gonna be up all night.
Oh, so you said it took you 4 cycles, including that junior year cycle. What did the years between the application cycles look like for you?
So it was real interesting because you usually find out about, I guess, like February, March. Every school's kind of different. Like Texas is a little different because they're not with VMCAS. They have their own system you have to apply it through. So it's really about when you hear from them. Uh, you know, in between those gap years was just usually me working a whole bunch, getting as much experience as I can. I was in charge of my pharmacy at my old clinic. Worked 7 days a week just because I was the everyday guy. And, it was just a lot of like trying to find ways to improve myself with the resources I had on me at the time. Like taking more tech classes for my second attempt or taking harder biology classes that will pertain to the vet field. So many things, just looking to improve is what I mainly did during those times.
Did you ever feel like something to do with your background? There were gaps in what you needed to fulfill for veterinary medicine?
Definitely, definitely. I always try to hit every box that they always look for in like applicants, like research, good grades, being leaders and stuff. Honestly, what I was missing the most was because I think because my second attempt really was kind of like the quickest rejection I ever got. Like at least my first attempt I had. I was an alternate for an interview for Kansas, at least there. But my second attempt, I applied to a whole bunch of schools and just got outright rejected. And it was interesting because they always tell you something different. Like LSU, I remember when I played with them, they had an interesting thing saying like, I didn't have some I didn't have proper capitalization when I typed in some classes when I would just copy and paste them from my undergrad thing. And they look at those things. They look at every little detail. While with Texas Tech, who's primarily trying to focus on large animals, are like, hey, we love your application, but you have less than 100 hours with horses alone, it's kind of hard. Every school is going to be focusing on something different. You just have to find what that school is and improve upon it from there.
I think that's a good point. Every school is looking for something different, and I thought something that I really struggled with because I applied to 12 and got into three schools, but my acceptances weren't until way later in the cycle. They were, more of the last
Mm-hmm.
people that I heard from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm also from Texas, and so I applied to Texas A&M and M and Texas Tech
Mm-hmm.
thinking,
Yeah. So
hey, yeah, and
Yeah.
I was thinking, hey, I check all their boxes, right? I grew up on a
Mm-hmm.
farm. I have large animal and production experience. I'm from West Texas for Texas Tech specifically. I want to
Yeah.
go back to West Texas, rural specifically, large
Yeah.
animal, mixed animal. And I was like, I'm checking all the boxes. Heck yeah. And so to get those first two denials, Texas Tech and Texas A&M, back-to-back denials, my first people I'd
Mm-hmm.
heard back from, I literally felt like my dreams were crushed. I said, if I didn't get
Yep.
into those two schools that I thought that I was the best applicant for, where
Mm-hmm.
the hell am I going to get into? Because
Exactly.
if
Yeah.
not there, then where? But obviously that didn't happen. So I don't know. I mean, what does it feel like to kind of go through that multiple years in a row? I was lucky enough to
Mhm.
get in a couple other schools later, but
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so actually I wrote this down. So like I said, my first attempt didn't really hurt my feelings too bad, junior year, didn't even really had all the classes. I was still finishing them, got rejected real quick. Second year, going to my senior year, didn't have my full science GPA finished out. I had a lot of my like 400 level classes in there still left to take. So it wasn't too, I mean, I was disappointed, but like it also gave me a feel on like how every school's process is. Like Florida's is so different from Virginia Tech or from LMU or from Western in California versus Texas. Every school is so different. So I liked my second year to like, it really, don't get me wrong, I was bummed out. You're always going to get bummed for rejection, no matter when it is. It could be your first, it could be your last. You're always going to feel bad. But it really gave me a feel on like what schools are looking for. And then so that was my second attempt. My third attempt was when I had graduated, and I really thought I was gonna hit my stride on this one. Had my finished hours, got my research done, worked. I'm pretty sure I've been working in a vet clinic since I was 18. I had years of experience. The only thing I was missing was really large animal experience, and I didn't really go on to do graduate classes. And my third year is when I applied to, I believe, half the schools in the nation. Just I really kept them all in the South, honestly. From there, that was the hardest rejection because that was the year I had the most interviews. I had about 8 interviews, and just statistics wise, I should gotten in any of those 8, and I was an alternate for 3. Didn't get in for any of them. One of them being Texas Tech. I thought I'd be a shoe in there. They're only taking from 2 states, and that rejection really hurt because I really thought it was going to be great there. Even though I'm not a big large animal guy, they still teach small animal, and I can learn large animals as I go. So that one really was kind of crushing. But then my fourth year, this is when it gets a little crazy. So I cut it back a little bit. I talked to like a lot of the schools about what they want. LSU and A&M were probably the biggest help with what they wanted you to improve on. Like always set up those meetings to talk with someone. Don't look at just the reviews because I feel like those are just the most basic thing that they can give you. They just check some boxes and put it on email. Interview with someone. Anytime that you see an email about how you can improve yourself, go to those. Even just showing your face, because the people teaching these are the people on the board. So, and like A&M, I had one lady's like, I promise you, if you just go fix this, because I had one C in my undergrad from a freshman level class. Like, it doesn't matter where you get it done. You don't have to do university, you just do a dual credit, or not dual credit, community college class, and you'll get it. But then my fourth year was the crazy year, as this is my fiance is also in vet school, and she got accepted on our third attempt. So moved up to Virginia. I actually messed up and missed my Casper test due to like the moving process, and I wasn't able to even apply to A&M my last year. And so that was a big kind of hurt because dream school from Texas, yada yada yada. But I applied to less, and I focused on the schools that I felt like gave me better responses on how to improve myself, or the ones I were alternates for. And to go from 13 8 interviews to 10, I applied to 10 schools and I got one interview my last year. I didn't even get it in. Funny enough, I don't know what happened with Mizzou system, but I actually got a rejection letter at first. And then 2 months later, it was like in October when I got that, or in October. Yeah, no, it was October. I got rejected in October. And a month later, like a month before interview started, they were like, "Oh, there was a mess up in our system. You were actually supposed to get an interview email." And I was like, "Oh," so I went from being accepted to zero my last application cycle to having an interview to going to an interview, then to becoming an alternate, and then hearing a month in May. So that gave me 3 months to move. So it was a crazy story in between there. A lot of time, a lot of working. But I can go into like what I thought was the most help in improving your thing. But yeah, that's my basic story of like how everything went. And yeah, so now I'm here in Missouri. And couldn't be happier.
Oh, I did not know all of
Mhm.
that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I
Crazy,
can only
crazy what will happen.
I can only imagine how you felt year to year having different reactions from the schools
Mm-hmm.
because I think a lot of people would assume every year improvement or getting closer and then just
Mm-hmm.
being like this shy of it. Like,
Yeah.
did you ever question if you would not apply again
Yeah,
or if it was
honestly.
worth it? Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, it was. The only detriment I would say was, don't do what I did and cast a wide net, thinking that you'll snag something somewhere. Sure, I had a bunch of interviews and had those alternate spots, but if you're gonna be 50th on the list on every school, it's pretty much not the best look. And let's see. It was just crazy to deal with it going from cycle to cycle and learning from what every school wants. This was interesting because I actually did leave the field at one point. This was before applications, and then I realized I wasn't happy in pharmacy, so I came back to vet med. Once you do that one first quit and then you realize how much you miss it, you really can't go back. I mean, my thing is like I was actually, if I didn't get into Missouri this past year, I was gonna give it one more shot and probably was gonna be done, because I would have to move on at some point. My fiance would be graduate from her vet school. I want to hold her back. Living in Texas, having as much experience as I have, I was honestly gonna go because I was actually in tech school when I got accepted because I just decided, you know what? She was living up in Virginia. There was not good jobs out there, so I moved back to Texas to support her from there. And while there, I got a bunch more experience. I went to tech school, got to take some really cool classes. I think that was honestly the biggest help on my application. And it's just like once you leave the field, you truly miss it, and then you have to come back. Even if I wasn't going to be accepted at vet school, I was going to be somewhere in the field, whether it was owning a practice just as an owner, whether it was being an office manager, a head technician, something in the field was going to happen for me. I truly never felt like I was going to leave the field, but applying again did, kind of, money every year, application, dealing with rejection. It's something that makes you truly think if it's right for you. But in the end, I believe you're meant to be where you're meant to be. So just keep going for what you hope for.
That's amazing. Oh my God, you're gonna make me cry. I'm gonna hold it together. Oh my gosh.
I
That is the
think
most beautiful thing, Jet. There's this song by Luke Combs, and it's something like, it goes like, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this? And it's like, if he
Yeah,
weren't famous, and someone asked him that in an interview. And he's like, what do you mean I would be doing this? Like, no matter, in like,
exactly.
whatever capacity I would be here. And I'm
Hmm.
so glad that we're in class together
I
because
am.
it just shows how amazing Mizzou's class is. Shout out.
Yes. Yeah, shout out to class.
yeah, and the resilience and like I don't know, I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but I kind of had the opposite journey where it felt like everything was really fast-tracked because I graduated high school at 17, which isn't like an abnormal age, but I was
Hmm.
the baby of my class and then I went to college at 17
Hmm.
and um, graduated in 3 years and didn't have a lot of as much experience as I thought. Anyway, point is I had like a whole conversation with my parents and I said, I don't think I'm going to apply this year, like at all. And I just want to take a gap year. It was something I really thought I was going to do. I was dead set.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, just after that conversation with my parents, they were like, I mean, do it. You know, what's the
Mm-hmm.
worst that can happen? You get
Yeah.
in. And I said, yeah, I guess so. And so I applied. And now that I'm in vet school, I can definitely see the gaps,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to basic tech skills. You know, I'm doing these externships and I'm
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be learning all of the doctor stuff. And it's like, actually, I never learned how to draw the blood. Before
Mm-hmm.
I interpret these chem panels, I might want to go look at that. And then
Mm-hmm.
so I've been learning tech skills as I go. And I think if I had a bigger or a stronger foundation in some of the basic skills and how a clinic operates and things like that, because all of my work was either with dead animals or production animals. And that's
Yeah.
not the same thing as going into a small animal clinic or an emergency clinic and being expected to know all of these basic tech skills. I was told recently, hey, you need to work on your tech skills. And I said, yeah, I should. You're so right. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, and it's such a limited way to do that too. Like you can really only do that through work or interning or giving away hours, you know?
Exactly. And I only bring that up because I've been asked, hey, was it worth graduating early or going to vet school early if
Mm-hmm.
you would? And yes, like I don't regret my decisions at all throughout my entire life, but I do have a noticeable gap in a lot of these hands-on skills. I'm very intelligent. The classwork is fine. I'm doing fine in class. It's the clinical skills and the basic things that I literally never learned because I didn't work in a small animal clinic or in a lot of clinical scenarios in general. So if that is something that you as a listener are considering taking a gap year to work on those skills, definitely recommend it. You can't go
Mm-hmm.
wrong either way because you can always build those skills. It's just going to be, I think I would have appreciated a stronger foundation in these skills, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
it would help to
Yeah.
have that expected knowledge. So,
I've seen every surgery under the sun you could think of. I've placed hundreds of catheters, millions of blood transfusions. No, it's great. And I will say though, the one thing I will say is like, the only negative I would say to having kind of a gap year is, but it also comes with a lot of positives, is like I'm feel like I'm very technically sound. You could probably hand me a needle right now and I'd probably still get a catheter in it. But like the thing I will say is getting out of the school habit. I've been out of school for 2 years and I was in tech school, and it's like cool and all, but like, it's not near the level of like hot hard biology classes or anything close to like vet school classes. It gets you prepared, don't get me wrong, but like the one negative is getting back into the swing of classes because it was a real hard couple stumble and falls in the start of my vet school career. But once you get your feet underneath you, you'll be fine, I promise. But yeah, that's the one negative I would say to a gap year, even still. That's just a me thing. People can probably pick up a book and have no issues whatsoever. That's the only thing I would say about it.
that's an interesting point. Somebody left us a great comment and they kind of asked two questions. There are two questions that they had before taking their gap year
Hmm.
or before getting into vet school after their gap year. And then they answered their own questions. And I thought it was interesting. Kind of the same thing you said. So their first one, they said, I have to admit that at first I was hesitant about taking that time out of school. So just what you were talking about. Number one, what if I lose my motivation and wouldn't want to go back to school once you're
Hmm.
out? Like, oh, do I really want to go back to school, take the pay cut, take the time? And you can, but it's a sacrifice to have jobs in vet school. We all know.
Yeah.
And so, number two, what if I would not know how to be a student again when the time came? And then they answered it now that they're in vet school. So, one, the gap year will help you confirm if you actually want to study for 4 more years in a program as intense like veterinary medicine. It is
Very
a
true.
serious commitment and it involves many sacrifices. It's okay if during the gap year you decide this is not the path for you. And that's important too. I know people who have taken gap years and decided to stay a tech forever or go to tech school, become a LVT, RVT, and get the
Hmm.
pay grade jump and knowledge jump without going to vet school. It's very different. They're not the same thing, but it's another option. Or to go into management, kind of the options that you talked about. There's other opportunities within this field, and I think that's important to talk about because when I was in high school or even early undergrad, I don't think I really understood that people did that as a career. I was like, oh, those are people who want to be vets. That's not true.
Hmm.
We always need great techs, and not every great tech should become a vet. We need great techs. I was at an externship last week and met some of the most talented, intelligent, knowledgeable techs I've ever met. And I was like, stay where you're at, actually. Because if
Mm-hmm.
I opened my own clinic and I wanted to look for techs, you're the kind of people I'd be looking for. And I would definitely pay you more for it because you know more than I do when it comes to these kinds of things. And so their second question, they answered, I felt out of practice in the first few weeks, but the student mindset came back pretty quickly. However, I don't see this as something bad because regardless of gap years, this is a new experience for everybody and is very demanding. You have to develop new studying strategies, routines, and habits anyway. It is the process of being a first year student in a doctorate program. I agree with that. I went straight from undergrad to vet school and I still am working on my studying strategies. Like I'm still changing it for every class, for every so you kind of have to work on it regardless. But I just wanted to talk about that because I thought that they wrote a very long and useful answer about what you just talked about. I was just going to say, kind of things that we've already talked about, but just to look at the data, years between vet school and undergrad, honestly, it varied everywhere from 1 to over 6. So, like, there wasn't really a big consensus. It was mostly 1 or 2 years. How many
Mm-hmm.
application cycles before you got accepted? Looks like mostly two, and then a tie between 3 and 4. And then, intentionally took a gap year, 60% said no, 40% yes. And non traditional, do you consider yourself non traditional? That was actually a 50-50 split.
Mm-hmm.
So, and was taking time beneficial? I thought this question was another good one because looking back, the options were somewhat or extremely beneficial, somewhat beneficial, neutral, or not beneficial. 60% said extremely beneficial, and 80% said extremely beneficial, 20% said somewhat. Nobody said that it was neutral, not beneficial,
Yeah.
anything like that. And I say that's probably about accurate. Like I wish that, like I said, I had gotten some of those skills. I'm sure there's many benefits to taking gap years.
No, it's really interesting. When we got the results back from that form, it was like a poll of 25 people, I should say, I think dispersed around the country. I don't know a lot of these things because you look at the acceptance rates for schools, and normally out of state is what, 3.5%, and then in states between 20 to in the 30% acceptance rates. So let's just, for all of our listeners, majority are rejected. A far majority are rejected the first time, and I would like to normalize it. I have such like a different perception of it now being in veterinary school because I truly don't care how many times it took someone to get in. I feel more qualified to be there. I don't know if you feel that way, Jet, but watching some of the people in our class, I feel like if they took multiple cycles, they don't take it for granted. They're more technically talented by a long shot, and they're very, very serious about what they do. They're not entitled either. Like, they earned it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really puts it in perspective shit for you when you take those years off to see just be in the field and learn to appreciate everything. I think like it's actually kind of more of a driver for me at least, you know. Like I love working in a clinic as much as possible. I have more overtime than you can imagine. It's just being there and seeing it's not being the bomb and toll bull because I wasn't that, but like being able to be that person that makes those big decisions and be able to really help people and be able to have the power to help more people, I think is what really drove me to keep going and to just improve myself and be better.
So we had a question. How did you deal with the comparison, watching others get in while you were still trying, and even more so your fiance? I can only imagine.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it was actually really interesting. You know, I didn't actually know many people wanting to go to that school. You know, I don't know. I was at it wasn't like a small university, but it was smaller. And usually by the time you get to that point, most people have kind of given up on the dream. You know, they just don't think they're smart enough or the classes are too hard or whatever. So I didn't really have too much to compare to. But like you said, the biggest one was my fiance. We both had kind of very different routes. Our first two parts of our relationship, she stayed back at community college and did that because it was free for us in Dallas. And then she eventually came over to my university, where I'd been taking more, you know, science classes, taking harder level classes, and our GPAs were about the same. Hers was a little better, but then it came down to like experience. I'll say she has more experience than me. She completely had like $20,000 like saved up after she was done with community college. She was like ready for undergrad, and she And, it came down to like experience. We both worked clinics similar hours. She had about 1,000 more hours than me in clinic experience. But I think what it came down to was a couple of things. One, her having a lot more large animal experience because she worked with a dental specialist and she got to see special horse surgeries, all these different kind of osteology surgeries and kind of every ACL, MCL, whatever ligament torn surgery, you can see broken jaws, and him writing a textbook. So, it's just like there was really much different from us. And I actually had more. She only had 2 interviews the year she got in, and I had 8. So, like, what does that mean? Does it mean? And she had 2 schools that I didn't even get to interview at, and I had 8 schools that she didn't. So, it was really weird to go because I honestly thought, just thinking about back to that time, was thinking, like, oh my gosh, if it ends up being me that gets into vet school, not her, it'll make me feel bad, but I'll be happy for myself and it's more likely to happen to me. But then as like my rejections kept coming in and she gets her acceptance, I didn't know what to think. So, it's never, I'm going to say never compare yourself because everybody's completely different. Me and my fiance, very similar paths and like the grades and experience aspect, but just little differentiations here and there, or different ways you write something can really change a lot. And that's actually one thing that A&M talked with me about is like, a lot of schools don't care about the grades as much. I've talked to many, many people who decide that. And grades, as long as you're not just like, don't get the lowest GPA you can to apply to vet school. Let's be honest there. But like, they read into more of your personal statement, all your experiences, your essays, your letters of recommendation. They're looking for like little specific details from each of them, and it's just there's so many different aspects that different schools look at. And then it gets to the interview portion. I think of myself as like a really good interviewer. I know how to talk to people. I've been trained in it and everything you can think of. But the one thing I would say is like also during my application, my first like one in my I don't know, because like the second year I got to go to like one school, but my first 2 years, most of them were online like this because COVID was really kind of hitting when I was there. And I think being an online interview, congrats to people who have gotten in and can do it. But biggest piece of advice I'll ever give you, and please listen to this, is go to your in-person interviews. It changes so much about it. They can see your energy, they can see how you look. You're not just in a room answering their questions, because I feel like it's very impersonable. And there's still some schools out there that don't even have an interview. They just have like pre-recorded questions that you just answer. But if there's an opportunity you can to go to an in-person interview, 100% do it because it makes the world of a difference. You can make a way better impression than you ever can through a screen.
That's a great point. So LSU did not do interviews the year that I got accepted, but I went to an in-person interview for Royal Veterinary College, which was the multiple mini interviews, the MMIs, and they had it in like 3 or 4 different locations throughout the US because it's a UK school. And so I went to one in Dallas, and it was so interesting because you also get to know so much more about what they're looking for, and you get to meet the people that are going to be teaching you or the people you're going to be around, and you can talk to them about they're just so cool. Like I remember it was kind of an all-day thing for the MMIs because they knew that, I mean, they had flown all the way out from the UK and we had all flown in or out or whatever. And they really took the time to give us a presentation about all of the cool things about their college and meet every single person individually. Like the professors, I'm assuming they're professors, or I know they were. They would go around and talk to you and then that also made the interviews later in the day a little less scary. So that was just another experience. And I wanted to bring back up, y'all talked about, I guess, maturity for those gap years and the difference and taking things serious. I'm kind of guilty of it. I'm the kind of person, I don't do mornings. I'd rather work a 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. shift than like an 8 a.m. to 3, if that makes sense. Anyway, so I find myself, I'll skip a morning class and watch it later. There's no consequences. It's not attendance mandatory for first years at LSU, and it's recorded. So there's not really like a downside to not going. But I was going to say, people who are older than me and people who have had full-time jobs, people who have taken gap years, they all are very serious about going to every single thing, taking it serious while they're there. And I like admire that so much. And I tell myself all the time, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be like them. Somebody told me once, one of these people, they said, well, I look at it as a job. You can't just not show up to your job. And I was like, you're so right. You're so right. I don't know. I'm also just very involved, and so I get busy and I'm like, whatever, I'll skip my 8 a.m. and watch it at 3 p.m. after my last class. It doesn't really make a difference for me, but I do think it's a big thing, maturity. It was also one of the number one things people said in the most valuable thing gained in their gap years. Almost all of them said maturity, life experience, personal growth, professional growth, knowledge, confidence. That's kind of the synopsis of what everybody thought that they gained. That and burnout prevention. There were just so many things. I was like, yeah, that makes sense now that y'all say that. You're right. All of the people who took gap years or that are older than me are definitely more mature than me. But I'm 21, so like, oh well.
I would
Oh
not
yeah,
be ready at 21.
yeah.
No way in hell.
I don't know how people. I think back when I was 21. I don't know how y'all do it. Like I definitely couldn't do it back then. I'm actually closer to age to the emergency doctors at the hospital than I am to most of my classmates. And I don't know how I could have done. I don't think I could have done it back then with my maturity level. But it's every person's different, and I do think taking that gap year gets you that experience and shows you a little bit of the real world. Because another thing is too is like working reception. You see some of these students not see know how to handle a person in an emergency situation, and another form of that maturity is learning how to learn to talk to people or learn to talk to clients in those stressful settings. And it doesn't have to just be emergency. It could be something happening at your clinic alone, whether it's like a misprescription filled, something else got messed up, surgery mishap, anything. And getting that life experience really matures you into realizing this is all serious, so you don't want to miss these classes. You don't want to miss those lectures. And I agree with you. I'm guilty. I've done it a time or two where I've, maybe missed that 8 a.m. and had watched the lecture right after at 3. Um, but it's all perspective. Once people see the real world when they get into clinics, I think they'll really hit them. Like you got to be mature in every situation at all times.
Yeah, and also I know a lot of people when we had the APVMA Facebook group and I was kind of in charge of that. I bring that up a lot because literally every single day I spent at least an hour looking through the group chat. My whole job was to monitor and moderate. And so I read a lot of posts and I read a lot of FAQs and things like that, which is part of the inspiration for this episode because people absolutely lose their mind. I did too. Like it's so serious, but the gap year, all the questions about gap years, all the questions, so many questions, but a lot of them are the same and a lot of the answers are all the same, which is kind of why we wanted to address what we could in this. But I was going to say, I see or saw a lot of people talking about, I'm scared because I'm older. I'm not straight out of undergrad. Am I going to fit in? To be honest with you, not the youngest, but one of the youngest in my class, and I'm the person that's out of place. It's more people who have taken multiple cycles, and it's also irrelevant. Once you're in school, genuinely nobody, I don't know about y'all, but we had a conversation during like a random wet lab one time, and we were talking about something, and somebody said, oh yeah, yesterday was my birthday. And I said, oh, how old are you? And they said 28. I was like, you're 28? What the heck? Like, and they were like, well, how old are you? And I said, I'm 21. And they were like, what? Like, people don't even know or notice unless you're obviously a different age. And even then, people still treat you the same. I just don't think that once you're in vet school, people really care about it.
No, the age thing is honestly coming in. I was 25 when I started this, 26 right now. I thought it was going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be with a bunch of people who just learned how to drink and just, not mature. But honestly, it doesn't make a world of difference. The people who I didn't even know were 28, 30, they seem like they're 20 to me as well. So the age thing, don't even think about that. That is such a nothing to worry about kind of issue. I don't, I mean, I know how old the oldest person in our class is, but like, would I have guessed that was their age? Not even close to that. And, even some of our professors, I think some of them are still in their 20s, and I can't even tell. So, the age thing, anybody needs to hear that, don't even think about it. It's so minuscule and no one cares at all. Now, will you get that little, oh, wow, you were that age kind of reaction every time? Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of a compliment. I see it at least.
It's definitely a compliment, and most of the time it's because, to me, I think I'm not the only person. I've had this conversation before. When you're choose an age, 21, 22, 23, whatever, you think everybody around you is also that same age, if that makes sense. Like, you view everybody as kind of the same age past your 20-year mark. So every time somebody tells me they're not 21, I'm like, what? And then it's the same reaction for them. They're like, you're not 28? And you know what I mean? So it's not even like, dang, you're old. It's like, wait, you're not my age? Like both directions. So it's just really funny. But going to some of these questions kind of that we talked about on the Google form. So we talked about what you did during gap year, some of the more basic things. What would you say is your best advice for pre-vet students who are facing, looking, or either intentionally or not intentionally taking a gap year this year?
Oh, definitely. So one thing I will say, if you've never applied and you think about taking a gap year, just apply. Apply to like 1, 2 schools, give it a shot. In-state schools, always just apply. I've known so many people who apply their or senior year of college and then they just get in. They didn't think they were going to get in and they get in, they get to start early. A lot of schools have accommodations for that. So that's my first piece of advice. Going from that, building off your question of the gap year, is, why I saw that question earlier, I kind of broke it down into three things: is review, plan, and execute. From there, if you did find out from the schools if you got it or not, ask them what you need to improve on. Show that you're trying to make improvements. Even if you don't do a thing, even just making them aware of your presence is something good. So that's the review. See what you need to improve on. Mine was I needed more large animal experience, so I went and fixed that. Plan to do it. Go or ask your mentors, ask the community, find anything. The only way I got it's kind of hard to get into the horse and large animal thing just on a whim, but I got it through my receptionist who's gone to her horse doctor for 30 years, and just through that one connection, I was able to use my one day off a week to go up to that horse clinic and work. It's just, you need to see what you need to do, plan it out, execute it. If it's something that can wait, push it off till then. But don't stop improving, because my biggest regret is my second attempt was not doing anything in that gap year. I just thought I have plenty of experience. I graduated. I don't need to do anything different. And that's not it at all. You need to constantly be improving. Just be able to add something to your resume. And the biggest thing I would say is the biggest help in a gap year is doing something along the educational lines, whether it's research. Research is always great to do. Get your name on paper, get something published. Every school will love to see that. But I think the biggest help, honestly, was tech school. I went there, and you get to take some really fun classes. I took parasitology, anatomy, and, just animal welfare, like real bare bones classes, and like schools love to see that. I had no school really ever ask about my education until I brought up the tech school stuff, learning what I learned there, and just getting your foot in the door and being able to have a name attached to it. Heck, even during my Mizzou interview, just mentioning that I went to the tech school in Dallas, one of my interviewers, his protege is actually the head dean of the tech school in Dallas. So just doing anything lead you places that you won't ever expect, or give you experiences you won't ever expect. And so just don't do nothing. Do something to improve and find out what you need to improve on, is what I would say. And it's different for everybody. If you need to go back, fix grades, do that. If you need to go get more experience, do that. If you just want to take a break and just not think about it, you could do that, but don't just do nothing. Go get a job in a tech as a tech, or do something in the vet field, especially be the vet field, because you have to learn the reality of this field. It's not all puppies and kittens, sunshine and roses. You're gonna see some bad things, and you're gonna see some not so nice people, and you're gonna have to learn to deal with that, not just be able to just go on a limb on that. So that's my biggest piece of advice: is plan on what you need to fix, ask vet schools, or ask what you need to fix on your application, and just plan to execute it and use your resources around you. Again, I would never have met this horse doctor if I didn't talk to a receptionist about this issue. And he was great. I got to learn to do so much. He was actually trained to do AI, so I got to learn to do that with horses. He let me do the scope. I forget the nose scope. I can't remember the actual word, but got to do that. It was real cool. And I got to work my first colic horse. That's an experience, all my experience that I didn't know I signed myself up for. But I'm not gonna say I regret it, because I had a great time. I learned so much, and it's just being stagnant is the issue. Don't do what I did my second attempt, or I guess my second to third attempt. That in between year is do nothing, because I had more interviews, but it amounted to nothing because I didn't improve anything. So just constantly look to improve and better yourself. Failure doesn't mean you failed, it just means more room for improvement.
That's perfect advice, really. I mean, I also believe that don't listen to a lot of people who aren't in the profession. I almost didn't apply or try at all because in my, let's see, sophomore year of undergrad, I got two C's. I'm horrible at chemistry, even though my dad's an organic chemist. And the counselor told me I would never get into veterinary school. I decided to not believe her. I worked really hard on my application. I did every deep dive into like, how do I apply? What do I do? We have an episode on Vemcast Deep Dive. So for our listeners, please listen to it. We give a lot of really good advice on how to market yourself because that's the whole thing. This is marketing yourself and making sure you fit every single box. And then I got into 4 veterinary schools. And so I want our listeners to not believe the people who quit. You need to believe the people who stayed. And like you said, like Jett, who they couldn't imagine their life without it. And those are the people who get in. It doesn't matter how many cycles it takes, they're going to get in.
And did you have anything that you would have done differently? So just to share what people said, the number one, I'll let y'all guess. What do you think the number one thing people said that they wish they had done differently during their gap year was?
I think I know.
Gretel might know it because she probably knows.
I feel like it just has to be something technical skill because that's the thing everybody feels like they just feel like they don't have enough of. But I'm willing to think it's probably going to be something with classes or grades.
None of the above. It's travel.
Oh, I thought
Travel.
you were saying
As
money. It's
That was the
travel.
oh,
second, the number one thing. Literally, somebody like all caps said travel, and it was also something that people said that they loved doing during their gap year was the ability to travel. So travel
mhm.
and save money, and we already talked about saving money. That is, mm,
Yeah, I will say I did go do a lot of cool traveling in my in between, and I would probably never ever be able to do if I was in school still. So, I will say that is something I can't say I regret not doing because I actually did. Because all my friends always were going on trips somewhere, so I somehow was able to tag along to those. So yeah, I would say if I was just staying in the same place all the time and not traveling, I think I would have gone insane.
yeah, I definitely being in vet school with no money, so double whammy, not being able to travel. Now I do swipe my credit card, and now trust I will go on a trip. But I don't have the money to do so. So it's just like, nah, I'm gonna make the sacrifices to save and protect my peace. My cat's going crazy, sorry. But yeah, the top answers, or the only answers were travel. Pretty much everybody who responded to that question said travel. Save money was the second one. A couple of people said nothing. Okay, fair enough. They were like, I loved everything I did. Don't need to change it. Fair enough too. And then the other two answers were more research and more hands-on with other species. So we had a couple people say, I only did exotics and small animals or whatever variation of that, and they wish they had done more large animal horses. Name one.
This is one thing I'm glad you said that because I really want to bring it up is I've talked doing my interviews with these schools, they're always like, "Hey, don't worry about not having experience with every type of animal, from exotics to large animal to anything." I'm gonna be honest, if you get that experience, like I know they say they don't care, but they really do. The only thing I added to my resume besides the tech school was getting that horse experience. And honestly, I thought I would I thought I would hate large animal. I've always been a small animal guy, exotic pet kind of guy. I've always worked with birds, rats, dogs, cats, everything under the sun. Because my doctor did see exotics. Heck, I saw a lemur one time, and it was just that truly does matter. Like, don't I know the schools say they don't, and that you'll learn it while you're in school, but get that experience. Because even still, people are so like once you get to vet school, you feel like you get this kind of like imposter syndrome, kind of going like, oh, I don't deserve to be here because I don't know how to work that horse, or I don't know how to halter a horse, I don't know how to herd cattle. Get that experience, because who knows, maybe you'll love it. I ended up finding out I might do go work on horses to do cattle, depending on how I build my clinic. And there's so many programs out there for large animals that like just pay off your loans. There's one just with the U.S. government that pays 40,000 a year if you work 8 hours a week. 8 hours a week on just cows, and you get $40,000. That's great. Get your experience, find what you love. Don't close every door. And if you're just that person that thinks you're just gonna do A, B, and C, and that's your plan. You're dedicated to it. Stick to that plan. But my biggest advice I will say is get as much animal experience as you can. Don't be like me and just stay. And I love my clinic. I love Dr. Rife to death. She is the angel of my life. She's the greatest woman ever. But I do think I should have, worked a little less and gone to get more experience, in which I did my last attempt. But don't don't worry about your responsibilities first, because that's another thing too, is like working at clinics. I know a lot of people work at these rural clinics and they really depend on them as a worker, but don't put that effort ahead of your duties of what your dreams are, your hopes, all that. You gotta like make some sacrifices sometimes, because that was the hardest thing ever, was not even leaving like Texas, it's leaving that job, leaving the doctor who trained me for most of my experiences, has taught me a wealth of knowledge, has given me so much. So get that experience, appreciate your people, use your resources when you're there, is another big thing I wanted to bring up.
I feel the same way, but kind of the opposite. I don't want to say large animal clinic experience. I didn't have as much of that, but a lot of large animal production experience. I worked in the swine unit. Like I was in the trenches, you know what I mean? And I had,
Especially swine.
oh yeah, when I'm power washing, getting all of that nice things sprayed back onto my face, beautiful. Anyway, and then my other main experience was necropsy. So I saw a lot of species and it's invaluable. Like it is so awesome and perfect. And I think everybody should do a couple necropsies at least once. You really get to see the anatomy. Anyway, different story. But what I was lacking is working with what? Live animals. And so I also didn't work with small animals. So I was like, I feel pretty solid in my handling of horses and all of this. But when I go to these small animal clinics on externships, I've made a point, even though I don't want to go into small animal only, I want to go into mixed animal and do more large animal than small animal. But for all of my externships, I've chosen to do small animal, and at least this past few months, I'm going into equine next month, but I've realized that I just absolutely lack so much there. And that's something that I can't make up for other than going out and working in those clinics. It's something that I'm working on, but yeah, I agree. It would be very beneficial. I know in a class we were doing evidence-based veterinary medicine, and it's supposed to be, toned down, pretty easy. I don't want to say easy, but the clinical examples are very common, things that you would see in a clinic if you worked with that species, whatever, choose it. And so last semester we were doing, I don't know, I don't remember the lecture, but anyway, something with the gut. And they said, here's these symptoms, what does it have? And I felt like the whole class was like, GDV, GDV. And I was like, what the hell is a GDV? I literally was like, what are y'all talking about? Like, oh my gosh, I genuinely have noticed, I know nothing about dogs and cats. I was like, oh, it can't be that bad, right? It can't be worse than usually large animal is the thing that people struggle with because they didn't get that experience. But it's the same way. So definitely a little bit of everything would be great.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. Just not even, and I'm not saying you need to spend hundreds of hours with every animal. Just open yourself up to it, because I just spent one day a week for a whole summer on it. Probably about, I don't know, 300 hours, 500 hours with them, and the wealth of knowledge I've learned just from that, and heck, the stuff that I can just apply from like what I've learned in school is great. Like when we talked about the limb on a horse, one of the first things I learned was a nerve block. And then when we got to that section, I knew nerve blocks. And, I didn't have to think about like that lecture constantly. I just thought about what I was taught, because I'm a big believer in like, sure, sitting in a classroom, reading a PowerPoint over and over again, doing your Quizlet a million times is a good way to make sure you know the knowledge, but experience is the best thing. I can guarantee I'll never miss a clinician question on any of these tests I'm taking right now, just because I know all the tests. I know a thyroid test. I know a Cushing's, Addison's test. I know diabetes ins and out. That was my best test, is when we had a cell biology thing basically over all diabetes. So it's just, I also think it's a way of learning, is getting experience, even if it's nothing to do with like in vet med. Like I'm a got out to VBMA, big fan of them. I learned a lot of business aspects from working with my doctor. I was in charge of controlled substances ordering, and I didn't get to hit the button to say buy now. I always had to let my officer manager do that. But I learned how to, do proper inventory. You have to make sacrifices here and there on like what medicine you can get filled, or if like, should I prioritize getting this machine's reagent kit, or should I prioritize getting this machine's maintenance done? It's a lot, and it's experience that you can use for not just vet school. Biggest help for vet school, but not just vet school. You can learn a lot of life skills because get that experience. It's a way to learn, it's a way to improve yourself, and I think it's the most fun. Get to see cool things, do cool things.
Definitely. Did you incorporate any of that in your personal statement or descriptions, or what did you change for personal statement, descriptions, and letters of
hmm
rank? Did it vary a lot year to year?
Yeah, I actually did. So I actually had my lawyer friend help me a lot because I'm not the best at writing, understanding. I can write a paper, but I can't write about myself. That's like something I found very hard to do. But what I realized is in my first couple, I would focus so much on one detail in my interview or my personal statement that that's would be the whole thing. And that's not what you need to do. You need to display several different things. Mizzou really loved that I brought up research into mine because, Mizzou, we're here big on research. So I knew that they would want to hear about that. I talked about how I paid for all of my undergrad while being an undergrad student. I worked full time and was a full time student all 4 years, whether I had one job to three jobs, just varied. You just have to, like, with every year, I learned more and more. But what I think the best advice I could see is just diversify yourself, make yourself look great across the board everywhere. And you'll hit something that they'll like about you, whether it's, a school values more experience, whether they value your research, whether they value your work ethic, or if you're in the army, or if you have 5 papers published, or if you have a 4.0, really just present every aspect of yourself in those essays and everything. And I'm also going to be a little say that like you should really appeal to these schools and find out what they're for because like I said, when I found out Mizzou was big on research, I went back, read the whole paper, read everything that I knew about the research, and explained my part of it. I wasn't big in the research. I was just mentioned because I would go catch the snakes. I wasn't really doing the research on them. But like, I still was able to talk about that, and they appreciate that. So know your audience, show yourself, and also don't like try to I'm put a little censorship here. Don't try to bullshit them. They can smell it a mile away. It does not matter what you think. And another thing too is like if you say you do get rejected and you have a gap year and you're just thinking about what you said in the interview, don't think about that. Like, oh my gosh, I remember because there was this one girl, she was telling me about how she was doing research on a specific animal and they asked, "Oh, where's this animal from?" It was like an exotic and she said completely wrong country. And and she was like, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know, but I think it was in this area. And none of them knew that. And she was freaking out about that question and that like she's not gonna get accepted for that. She was accepted in the first go around. So don't dwell on your interview skills or focus on things that like don't matter in the end. Just know who you're appealing to. Don't bullshit. Show your full self and always be ready to be able to build off of what you say because they will. I've with all the interviews I've had, they will pull anything from those interviews. It could be the most minute detail ever. So many people brought up high school stuff for me. I never thought they would care about my high school stuff, but there was every school I feel like asked something about high school or some kind of curriculum that like translated that. Know your like don't just fill your application. Do something with it, explain it, be able to explain it, and know who you're appealing to. That's a big piece of advice I'd like to give to people.
Yeah, and on the topic of essays, don't use AI. Like
Please
for
don't. Please don't.
for
They
the
know they know so quickly and like, like I know you think like that older professor or these older people won't know. It's not just them looking. It's everybody. Don't use AI. That is such a bad idea. And if you think you're smart and you're going to put it through another AI to make it look like it's not AI, they know all the tricks. Don't do it. I promise you it's not worth it.
Also, I think it's not even like a typo or a little like something that you didn't run through Grammarly usually reads better and more personable than something that you wrote because I can see the argument, well, I wrote it and I just used Grammarly. Sure, whatever. But genuinely, like Gretel and I would read scholarship applications for APVMA and we were like, this is not like this person might have done these things, but they did not write this. If you
Mhm.
say, write an essay about this experience, and this experience, sure, that's the information that you did, but it just doesn't sound good, and it's so easy to spot. And I've heard some nightmare stories about people leaving. This part drives me crazy. When you leave the part that says, let me know if you need anything else, or whatever at the end,
it to me it shows just sheer unwillingness to care, because if you really cared you would type that whole thing out, make sure it's the best thing ever. And like you said, they notice the imperfections and like to see those things, you know. I'm not the world's best speller. I know there's probably a typo somewhere in that thing, and I probably did do a spell check on it, but like it's those, they like to see genuine. They again, like I said, they can smell bullshit a mile away. And if you think you're smart by using AI, you're not. It's not an original idea. They 100% know, and they're getting better with the application. Like I remember I got an email from the Texas one saying that they're really having to hammer down on the AI stuff because it's just so obvious now, and people are doing it left and right. So be original, be yourself. And I'm not saying AI is an interesting tool to use nowadays. You know, I'm not saying it's never going to be not useful. You know, use it as a way to improve yourself. Hey, hey AI, is there anything else you think I should like lengthen in this, or anything else you suggest I write? Don't use it to write. Use it as a way to just help you write.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree. I feel like when I applied, AI was around, but never would have thought of using it. Never would. And I wish that were still the standard because you have to be able, it's like a soul finding journey. That's how I felt writing my personal statement. It took me months and months and months to like craft what I thought was perfect, and like 7 or 8 people reviewing it and giving their thoughts. See. And I love that you said, like, if you cared, you would put in the work. And that is the veterinary profession. We study all day, and I might get called in tonight between 12 and 4 a.m., but I'm still happy to go. You have to care that much. And if you don't care enough to even write that essay, then this is not the field for you.
And I know, like, not to bring this up again, but genuinely, it's so infuriating because we had like, I don't remember, like 7 or 8 scholarships that we had to choose a winner for on a national level. And there was a couple categories, not one, but a multiple, where we could tell the winner used AI. But what are we going to do? Just not get the scholarship? Like, we can tell. And it's so upsetting that we didn't get one applicant that didn't use obvious AI. Like, that's really upsetting. Try to
That
care.
is very upsetting. You know, it's just like, and to me, I feel like it's even more obvious that you're using it. You know, like nobody's gonna have that perfect punctuation, or use that perfect grammar, or use that long word that you've probably read for the first time. And you know, those people aren't like checking them either. They're just accepting what it is and just submitting it. Yeah, AI is a good tool, but not for, it can't, it can't be you. You have to be yourself.
Yeah, and I feel like we were pretty lenient. Like, some of them, we ran all of them through an AI checker, and some of them came back as 100%, and we were like, hey, like, this one isn't 100%. They probably used Grammarly or something like that. That's not the biggest deal. But the ones that you left all the M dashes and like an emoji in, like, come on. Like, let's be so serious.
I would love to do our wrap up question, which, what has brought you joy lately, Jet?
Okay, so I'm gonna list off a couple of things. Some that are more momentary, some that have been going on for a while. One, we had an amazing fur ball. You know, I think we did a really good job on that. It was amazing, gambling, drinking, party all night. Really, everybody told me about how they were going to leave within the first hour. Everybody stayed for all the hours there. Second, SAVMA Symposium. I highly recommend it. If you didn't go, you know, it's great. You know, I will say some of the lectures, animal dentals and general practice. Like I'm big, I want to be a real dental guy with animals. And just telling her that, she got me this all expenses paid trip to St. Louis next weekend, or weekend of spring break. Yeah, next weekend, where they're paying for me to drive there, my hotel, anything I spend on the trip, and I get to get special dental training with specialists in the field, all in St. Louis, and I get a hotel for free. The only thing I had to do is just say hello and talk about my experience. So, you know, always talk to your mentors, always show appreciation to people, and go to SAFMA Symposium. And the other thing I will say, this is more nerd stuff, but the anime season has been great this year. Jujutsu Kaisen, Fire Force, Hell's Paradise, top 3 shows, amazing. They're the only things that get me through these weeks sometimes, I swear.
You must have loved the anime convention, though, for our listeners. It was at the same time as our
Yes,
symposium.
it was so perfect. I was able to somehow get to that area too. I walked around the convention for a little bit. I was just nerding out while also get to do vet nerd stuff. It was great. It was like the perfect. It was in heaven, honestly. I was having a great time, and I got to talk to people in cool costumes and all that. It was great. love the experience.
All right, well, thank you so much, Jett, for joining us today, for talking about it. Thank you so much to everybody who listens, and huge thank you to people who genuinely, I kind of synopsized everything, but I did really read all of them and just try to give the best representative of what everybody said. So big shout out to everybody who responded to this, for Jett for coming on, for my Auburn friend who sent us, awesome advice. Just thank you to everybody, and I hope everybody has a great day.
I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Mark Sheets, who was my mentor and inspired me to be a vet. Greatest man ever. Love him to death. Shout out to Dr. Rife. She was the person who supported me through vet school, paid my rent one time. My biggest mentor, greatest woman ever. Love her to death. And I would also love to give a big shout out to Gretel. She's being an amazing president, doing great. I love the podcast. And for those people out there who think they should just give up, if you got hope, hold on to it. It'll be better, I promise.
I love that. Yeah, and that's a huge point. We can't talk forever, but huge shout out to the mentors and the people who continue to inspire us every day. Let's dedicate this episode to them, because so much of that is because of them. I hate the people who tell me don't do it, or the people in the field, drop out, don't. Anyway, huge shout out to the mentor. But yeah, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.